Governments are way behind the curve, and they will be for decades to come, I suspect. But the reality is going to hit us like the COVID reality hit us. This is real. It is dangerous. It is deadly. But at some point, we're going to have to convert the fossil fuels to green energies. Well, this is beautiful. Okay, let me just hit continue here. A man with a conviction is a hard man to change. You know that from your experience. Tell him you disagree and he turns away. Then people turn away from you. Show him the facts and figures and he questions your sources. And sources are so important. We've lost some control over the source with social media. It feels logic and it fails to see your point. And that is so frustrating, is it not? But don't let it be. Your job is not to convince anybody of anything. You just lay it out there. If you want to buy it, you buy it. I know there's a lot at stake, but the more you press, the more resistance you're going to meet. Wasting your time and theirs, and you're in it. Gary Kasparov. Remember him? The chess champion? He had a brilliant thing to say. Again, most of these are in the book. The world is lurching toward a polarized post-truth reality. Kellyanne Conway, alternative facts. You ever hear such an obscene word? Alternative facts. The reason for that is, you know, in my day, most of what you have are newspapers, and the people on TV and the news reporters, they were reporters, not commentators, they were reporters, and you trusted them, Water, Cronkite, etc. You trusted them. But nowadays, there's no editors. Facebook is its own editor. Twitter or whatever that is its own editor. There's nobody checking the validity of what people are saying. So anything can be put out there. So that's why we're merging. We're there. We're not just merging to it. Now we are there in a post-truth world. And he knows about that growing up in Russia. He knows about how the state can control information, and the state still tries to do that with some success. Now, let's talk about why people won't believe what we know is to be true. Okay? Personal need for order and structure in those places. Some people like sameness. They don't want change. They like things to stay the way they are. And if the fossil fuel industry business is working for you, you want it to stay that way. You don't have to pay more for your electricity. You don't want to have to pay more for your gasoline pump. You want things to stay the way they are. So we differ that way. Some of us are more open to change than others. That's one difference in personalities. Cognitive closed mind, open minds, newest in thought. There are some people who can't entertain new thoughts. Scientists have found, psychologists, social scientists have found that people tend to believe what they've always believed. We hold on to old beliefs. We're reluctant to accept new beliefs. So if you're talking to somebody who's holding on to some old belief, you got a big job on your hands to pry that belief out of their hands. Because we're holding on to old beliefs because they make us comfortable. We don't want to appear like we don't know. You ever got somebody who wants to be an expert on everything? You can't tell them anything because they know it all. Number 3. Some people just like things black and white. Keep it simple. Don't make it complex. Global warming is just too complex an issue for some people. Climate change is too complex an issue for some people. They want something simple. And what's simple? Let's go on the way we are. Back to the sameness. So that's one thing. Rigidity. I'm not going to change my mind. I don't care how hard you push. I'm one of those people. I'm locked into this belief, and I'm not going to change my mind. And you can't make it, so we can't. Dogmatism. Some people are very dogmatic. They last on this belief, and by golly, you're not going to shake them from it. They're going to hold on to that forever, and they're very dogmatic about it. Yes. And give me your name.
Debbie,
Hi,
and I
Debbie.
guess when I think of some of these, I also think there's fear behind some of these things, because if I believe this all my life and that's not true,
Yes.
then that could mean that that's not true and that's not true, but I can't do that much craziness.
We're going to talk more about that when we talk about cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance has to be that I hold on to those beliefs that make me comfortable, that make me feel safe and secure. Your belief, we'll talk about this later too, in terms of solution aversion. People don't like the solutions to the global warming problem, because it means that we may have to pay more for this, we may have to pay more for that. We might have to put solar panels on our house, and it's not cheap. So, cognitive dissonance, solution aversion, we're going to talk about. But thank you. Anybody else? Like I say, feel free to, I don't call and interrupt. Feel free to raise your question, make your comments. Cover all that, I believe. Okay. How facts are used to be dismissed. Difficult to get a man to understand something when it's already on debt. That's so true. And the bottom line, when your stock portfolio is dependent on, let's say, the fossil fuel industry doing well, you want it to continue to do well. And that's understandable. I'm not being critical. That's understandable. We all like to have that cushion when we go into our retirement years. And we don't want anything to threaten that. But we've got to consider the next generation. Our children, our grandchildren. That has to weigh into our stock portfolio concern for them. I don't know how much you know about stress research, but one of the things we found out in stress research, it's not necessarily the man at the top that's the most stressed out. It could be the laborer at the bottom who's worried about, will I have a job when I come in tomorrow? If I don't have a job, how will I feed my family? How will I pay the rent? How will I pay the car payment? So stress has to do with predictability and control, not your position in an organization. So if you can't predict what the future is going to be, and you feel you have no control over it, you're really stressed out. Have you not found out, those of you who have children, sometimes you can't predict what's going to happen, okay? Or you can't control it, and that's very stressful. So, man-made disasters, they're sometimes a little more predictable. We know what's going to happen, and they stress us out more than natural disasters. We know, and another factor, the distance something, how close something is to happening, is also a factor. Things that are way out there, like climate change, it's not way out there in reality, but in some people's reality is way out there because it hasn't affected them yet. Yeah, there's fires in California. There is drought, there are floods, but are any of you personally affected by that? Some of you may be. You may know people who are. Are you personally affected by all that? Have you been personally affected by climate change? Maybe a little hotter than you like, okay, but you're really not suffering, are you? So the further something is in the future, the less concerned we are about it. And that only makes sense again, back to predictability and control. A lot of people's worries is, how am I going to buy my kids lunch? I'm going to get my kids a book for college. How am I going to pay for college for a student? So those more immediate things are much more stressful and much more occupy our concern than something that seems to be way out there, and for most of us still is. Okay. But you're here because you're concerned. I really appreciate that. Natural risk takers. We are, I mean, sometimes it's a risk just to get up in the morning. But we're natural risk takers, but we don't think about it. In my work as a psychologist, I had people say to me, I don't trust anybody. No, maybe, let's examine that. How'd you get here today? I drove. Did you ever trust anybody to drive here? Well, yeah, the people driving toward me. Okay. How about the brakes in your car? Do you ever trust them like they would? Yeah, you know, to make sure that they assemble it correctly in the factory and all that. So some of us are natural risk taker, but we don't always realize that. But there was one young man, Ellis Handel was his name, and he climbed up the face of El Capitan with no ropes. Are you familiar with this story? I saw it on the big screen here in Columbus. I forget what it was now. Oh, it's like you were right there. And that is risk taking. Most of us don't take those kinds of risks. But we take risk in the stock markets. We take risk every time we go out in the public anymore. We go to a mall, we're taking a risk. Now, it's not pressing on our mind. Hopefully it's not. You're not worried about it, shaking and looking at your shoulders every step you take. But just taking risks comes natural to us. Emotional or motivational reason. We tend to, as we said earlier, we tend to reason from emotions more from our intellect. Accountants probably don't do that. You can't afford to do that. Okay? Your clients don't want you reasoning, well, this feels good, looks like good numbers to me. Go with those numbers. They don't want that. But a lot of the decisions we make, are they not made emotionally? That new car you bought, new TV, the new this and new that, or whatever, a pair of shoes, I didn't really need those, but you know, it just felt good. Okay. We all do that. We're emotional reasoners. Most of our reasoning comes from our unconscious mind, not our conscious mind. We're not that rational about some of the decisions that we make. And we'll be totally irrational as a culture, as a world, when it comes to the threats of climate change. Cognitive dissonance, that's simply a fancy term that says we hold on to those beliefs that makes us feel good. Any other belief makes us uneasy, it makes us anxious. We don't want to believe that's to be rejected. That's all cognitive dissonance. Dissonance between the fact and the reality and what we want to hold on to. That figures out a lot. Confirmation bias. As I said earlier, we tend to hang on to those beliefs that we've had for a while. That's our bias. I've always believed this to be true. And you can't say anything that's going to shape me from that belief. Solution aversion. I mentioned that earlier. The solution to climate change is not pretty. It's pretty ugly. We are living an unsustainable lifestyle. It really is. And we're the last generation that can really do that. We've had the good fortune of being able to have about whatever we wanted, especially in our culture, in our society. That's not true throughout the world, of course. But in the USA, we've had a very good economy for the most part. Yeah, we had depression, we had recession, but things bounce back, people get back again. Even this last coronavirus thing that we're still going through, but we're out of some of it anyway. But we had pretty easy, but our lifestyle is unsustainable. Our children, our children are, your grandchildren, but they're not going to be able to afford the lifestyle we've had. I think you're going to become bearing down on them like a Big Mac truck. It may take even before maybe your great grandchildren, before the effect is perhaps more full. But somewhere down the road, your progeny is going to experience a lifestyle that's not their choosing, but is forced upon them because of the realities of global warming and climate change. That's in the book. What you see is all there is. That's your reality. What you see is all there is. I'm reminded of hearing on the news during the early outbreak of coronavirus, the young people flocking to Florida to vacation on spring break. And how many of those people said, I don't care about coronavirus. I'm here to party and I'm going to have a good time. What they saw is all that existed for them. The immediate pleasure. Well, they spoke about the pleasure principle, the immediate pleasure that they wanted, and to heck with coronavirus. It's a threat I'm willing to accept. Well, that's emotional reason, is it not? Partying on the beach with hundreds of thousands of other people, and it's at the point where this thing is spreading uncontrollably. Right. Versus serious, deliberate, thoughtful, timely thinking. We need to do more of that kind of thinking and less of the wasp. Personality differences, we talked about that before. The power of beliefs. Very true. If we're living this today, I won't get political, but we're living it today. The more you tell a lie, the more convincing it sounds. So all you have to do is keep repeating it. Global warming is a hoax. Or if global warming is real, somebody else, it's not caused primarily by human activity. It's caused by fluctuations in the orbit of the Earth. It's caused by different outputs from the sun. It's caused by ocean patterns in the ocean. It's caused by clouds, all that. If you keep repeating that, their number, almost 36%, believe that global warming is not real, and it's not anthropogenic in origin, meaning it's not human cause. And that's the message that the only message that some people are hearing. And so they believe it and they hold on to that belief. But beliefs can kill you. My mother used to say, there's something seriously wrong with me, I don't want to know. She meant it. You ever heard people say that? Maybe you want to know, you don't want to know. Something seriously wrong with me, I don't want to know. She had something seriously wrong with her. She had astrocytoma, cancer of the brain, astro coming after stars, which means it spread throughout her brain, and she was gone within a month. So she lost the capacity to know it very quickly. In a way, it's because she didn't want to lay there knowing she's going to die. She died very quickly, and her brain was so compromised she didn't know. We all know this. We can master this truth. A belief is not a truth. Okay, it's just a belief. And as I was saying, everybody's entitled to one. But that's all it is. It's not the truth. You ever heard and read or said, my mind is made up, don't confuse me with the facts. I'm not interested in your facts. Another problem with beliefs is they prevent inquiry. Once you believe something and you fasten on that, your mind's not open anymore. You've got a closed mind. It's like a steel trap that closes. Nothing new can get in. That's one of the problems with beliefs. So curiosity. Beliefs also lead to low quality decisions. If you've been in accounting or financial management or perhaps in your work, people who hang on to belief and they don't want to believe what you're telling them, and you're telling them something that will save them some money or save them some misery, but they're hanging on to that some belief they have because grandpa told me this, or my mother said I should never do that, or my dad said this. That leads to a pretty low quality decision. You got to have facts to make good decisions. Beliefs, like we said, are facts, and they delay action. Our delay in responding to the climate crisis is delay because of beliefs, because of confusion, because of doubt that the fossil fuel industry has been able to create, just like the tobacco industry did back in the 50s. fossil fuel industry adopted that playbook and played it to the hill. And it's worked for a large number of people. I said earlier, the source of your information is more important than your information. Where did you get that belief? Where did you get that idea? Where did you get that fact? Well, I read it on Facebook. Yeah. Okay. Or Twitter, or what are some of these other things? I don't know what they are. I don't even do Facebook. I got a Facebook account. My granddaughter says you need a Facebook account, Grandpa. No, I don't really. Yes, you do. I've got a Facebook account. I don't know what's on it. A picture, I see it. What do you think? Can social media be trusted?
Not currently, not without written regulations.
Those are a long time coming, aren't they? Rules and regulations. And it's so hard to regulate. How do you regulate it? It's worse than trying to regulate traffic. Traffic's very easy to regulate. Doesn't mean people don't follow the rules, but it's fairly simple what the rules are about driving. Some people forget them. We got one little turnabout in Mansfield. I mean, there's some people who pay no attention to it. So if you're not watching, you're going to get creamed because they don't get it, I guess. Or they don't care. I'm not sure which it is, but I'm always careful when I go through that one little turnaround there. I'm yeah, those are because I can't think of it.
Roundabout.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the consequences are pretty immediate.
Yes, and that's why we pay attention, isn't it? If it would hurt us maybe 20 years from now, well, what the heck? I'll take my chances. Very good point. The immediate consequences get our attention much more. The consequences are down the road. Or consequences. I'm not going to live to see the worst climate change. I'm just not. I'm 80 years old. I'm not going to live to see the worst of it. I don't know how many more years I got, but I know I won't see the worst of it. But I know my children will. I'm pretty sure. The oldest one is 51, and he will, and his children will. And their children. And it troubles me. Troubles me right here. Troubles me. And it troubles me one of the time. I'll show you this. Stop. What do you think? That's the title of the book. What do you think? How many are optimistic that global warming will be brought under control before too much damage is done?
That's a different question.
It is.
Damn it.
It is. I like it. He thinks very logically, very nicely, very lockstep. It is a different question. I will submit. I'll go back to my original question.
Can it stop?
Yes.
It can be done. Yes.
Are we gonna stop it?
You know, I played with that with my title of my book, Can or Will. Should I say, will it be stopped? Or should I say, can it be stopped? And I finally said, well, can it be stopped? But it will be stopped. It depends. Do we have the will? My mother, your mother probably also said, where there's a will, there's a way. It's true. Where there's a will, there's a way. And what's lacking is will. And why is will lacking? Bottom line. Oh, always the bottom line, isn't it? And ignorance. Big time. Indifference. We gotta remember this. Not everybody's a believer. But you know that. Global warming, denial, coming to religion.
Meaning it's taboo to talk about.
It's taboo to talk about it. nerve trouble in my hands. I keep hitting the wrong key, so bear with me. We are the second generation of human beings that have a chance to destroy or save the world. The first one was atomic bombs, nuclear bombs. That generation so far has spared us from the tragic fate of the unleashing of God only knows.
By a whisker.
Yes,
Two feet away.
yes. Really close back there, and what was it, 64, 63, 64? Kennedy and Khrushchev?
Some of the other false,
Yes.
Russians see American planes on the radar coming, they order an atomic attack, and the person who's in charge of unleashing the missiles says, no, we're not gonna do it. That was the difference.
And that's why it makes a difference who sits in the highest office in the land. Somebody who's rational, somebody who's not ruled by emotions. Sorry.
Interesting concept.
I think we ought to go back to that.
Paul,
Or not, yes.
Also, could you put that quote back up there?
Yes.
Thank you. I think for me, I am intellectually bit hopeless, but my heart is hopeful because of what's at stake. If I give up, that means that I've given up to my power over helping future generations. I'm not as old as you, but I'm up there, and
You're not even near.
but
Not even near.
I can't give up.
No, you can't.
Even though
We can't.
intellectually I think I've given up, I can't give up.
And that was one of my biggest struggles with this book. Whether you read it, whether you picked that up or not. I didn't want to come across as not being hopeful. I didn't want to come across as being a fearmonger. But it was very hard to walk that thin line between despair and hope. I want to be hopeful. I really do want to be hopeful. We have three strategies to combat climate change. Mitigation. That means things to stop putting all the carbon dioxide in the air and the other green gases. That do something. The other one is adapt. Fails and it's failing. We have to adapt. I learned how to adapt. I read this story of time just recently. Actually, a man living in Miami Beach, Florida. His house was getting flooded every time there was a high tide. Now he adapted. You know how he adapted? He spent $250,000 raising his home. How many people can afford to do something like that? How many people have the resources to adapt? The least among us. The least among us are suffering the most among us. They are not already. Bangladesh have seen their islands disappear. Most their buildings, their homes, their schools, and their shops is crumbling underneath them because of permaculture. The least among us will suffer the most. That to me is
The least responsible for it too.
I'm sorry?
They're the least responsible for the.
Absolutely. Yeah, the countries that are going to suffer the most, a good point, are the ones that are the least responsible for global warming, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, methane. Methane is very terrible. And we're not even serious about controlling the amount of methane. Well, now Biden is. But the previous generation was not serious about. The previous presidency was not serious about controlling methane. You have to control it when it comes out of the ground, and they had such lax rules about trying to keep the methane contained as it was coming out of the ground. And we're moving back into a more friendly environmental action. All right, the story of the whale. I read this several months ago now, maybe. There was this whale in the San Francisco Bay. Somebody remember the story? He got tangled up in the fisherman's ropes. And he was struggling. He couldn't make it. He was going to die. And he was so tangled. I don't know how many fisherman's ropes and things are in the San Francisco Bay, but apparently enough to tie up this whale. 2 fishermen with scuba gear went into water and worked tirelessly and diligently at their own peril. You don't mess around with a whale. Flip at that tail and you're gone. To cut the ropes. Do we have that much love for our children and grandchildren? We will risk everything to make this earth a more habitable planet for them. That's the story. Lorax, Dr. Seuss leaves us with a very important. And that's how this guy came in, he'll cut down all the trees. And Lorax says, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. They lobbied against it and all that anyway. They ended up cutting down all the trees and building factories, making furniture and whatever they did. Trees. And the Lorax said, unless someone has a whole final thoughts. Native Americans have a lot of wisdom. We didn't inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrowed it from our children. Just like the national debt. Everybody talks about the national debt starting out of control. Who's going to pay for that? Our children, our grandchildren. Because we don't want to give up our comfortable lifestyles. We don't want to be squeezed. So let's pass it on to the next generation. And that's what we're doing with climate change. We're passing the problem on to the next generation. And I feel badly about that. So I want to go back to the question, it all depends. There's only so much you and I can do to prevent the earth from becoming a more difficult place for our progeny to live. But the one thing, the most powerful thing that we can do, that not even half Americans do for the most part, is vote. The changes that are going to change this, it's going to have an effect on how much we're polluting the atmosphere, are going to have to be national and international policies. We can save plastics, we can drive less, we can drive electric vehicles, and that helps, don't misunderstand. But it's until these macro systems get in place, we're fighting a losing battle. So I preach to the choir, vote, but don't, not just vote. Make the climate one of your priorities. Make that one of your priorities. Some people's priority is abortion, and that's fine. I won't quarrel with that. That's fine. But climate change, global warming, has to be up there. So, when you consider who to vote for. And I would urge you, ask your legislator and her, where do you stand on anthropogenic global warming? Where do you stand on addressing the problem in a robust, immediate kind of way?
I have to apologize, I have to leave, I have another commitment.
That's fine, I appreciate your being
I'm not
here.
leaving because I don't like what's going on.
No, I'm, thank you for that explanation, but no, that's fine.
Yeah.
You need to go, you need to go. I want to touch real briefly, I've got 5 more minutes. I don't know how much time you want to give me, but I got 5 minutes before we're supposed to end this program. I want to touch on the morality of punishment. And if you have to leave, if you have anybody have a question now before I get into this?
I have a question, but I can wait till after
Okay,
the
You
more
won't forget
active.
it?
No, I
You
can't.
better than I am.
I just have a comment, speaking of voting, I hate to knock on doors and make phone calls for candidates, but
Yes.
last time I did it for Hillary Clinton, I was so frustrated because I was knocking on doors just north of campus. There was a lot of students, there was a lot of 20-somethings.
Yeah.
And I got probably 3 or 4 doors in a row. on the way. And
Yes.
so I started changing my shtick. And my shtick was I'd knock on the door and I'd say, hi, I'm volunteering for you. And it got their attention.
I love that.
And it was kind of like, uh-oh, I got crazy person here, but they had their attention because I was, I mean.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
I'm volunteering for you. I love that. That's good. Anybody else have any pearls of wisdom like that? That's beautiful. Okay. Well, let's talk about this a bit. What's the most compelling moral issue of our time? And that's only a partial list. You can probably anybody come up with something else you want to add to the list?
Criminal justice reform,
Criminal justice reform, yes.
justice.
Justice, equality, etc.
Income inequality.
Income inequality, yes.
Human trafficking.
Yes,
Human trafficking.
yes, yes.
Economic revival through supporting entrepreneurs.
I don't really good comedians anymore. I'm just sorry. Trying to bring some levity to the
You
whole-
know, but I'll just take a moment to say that I used to love Buddy Hackett when I was younger. But I tuned into him one later years with my children. Holy smokes, you can't listen to this. I mean, it went so fast. Like, this is too vulgar for your ears. I mean, you didn't feel that way. Right? Anyway, of course, you know where I'm going. I would suggest to you that the most fundamental moral issue of our time. And why? And treat it not as one I call a moral dodge. Climate change has been described as a perfect moral storm because it brings together 3 major challenges to ethical actions in a mutually enforcing way. Internation. The effect of climate change is international. It just says COVID is. It's an international effect. Well, hopefully COVID is not an intergenerational effect. Depends whether you get the vaccine, whether you're fortunate enough to avoid it. But hopefully it's not intergenerational. But climate change will have, as we all know, an intergenerational effect. The third reason I think climate change is the most fundamental moral issue of our time is interspecies. I mean, I really do care about the coral reefs that are dying and how that affects the whole food chain. I care about that. I care about that polar bear that looks emaciated, can't find food. I care about that. I care about living things, humans and other living things.
And I think one of the basic problems here is human exceptionalism. The idea that,
Yes.
I mean, we have American exceptionalism, and this guy, where we think we can do no wrong, we have the best at everything, which we're not. And we humans think we're the smartest, we're the apex of life on Earth, and we're not. We're just one species, one age, with a lot of power.
I'm gonna write that down. Never thought of it. Human exceptionalism. Bear with me. I can still read my own writing. Biggest time.
Well, it seems to me if we think we stand above them and they're under us and we stand there firmly, where are we going to be?
You know, we need to be a little bit more like Albert Schweitzer. Now, I will kill a mosquito. My grandson, one time, he was probably about 3 or 4 years old, came to our house. He lived in the city, came to our house, and you see some Anthony? Oh. Not big, we're not bothering anybody, but respectful. Oh, boy, Some of you are churchgoers, some of you grew up in the church, some of you still retain some kind of faith in some power bigger than yourself, called God. But I've come to this billion, something like that, billion people who claim that the Father of faith is Abraham. So we talk about Christians, Jews, and Muslims. 4.7 billion of them. Well, they all said enough is enough. What if the ministers from the pulpits once in a while, maybe just once every 10 years, would mention something about climate change? Book, by the way. To tell the truth. So Brigham talks about societal responsibility, is to say moral issue, not a political economic one. But we treat it as the latter two rather than the former. Because we don't want that uneasiness, do we? To look at it as a moral issue makes us uneasy. Because it requires change. Degree requires that we have ethical capacity to organize creatures. Back to your point, to express hope means we've got to get serious about global warming and taking it. That's the only time we can be hopeful. If we start taking it seriously and we start taking immediate and robust actions, then there's hope in that. Instead of playing the game of denial and denial, that goes on way too much in our politics. More so even all right, I'm gonna skip that. Oh,
Wait, go back.
okay, I'll go back anytime you want me to. It's your, I'm on your time. Okay, I'm on your time.
Well.
How far back do you want me to go? Or you, let's kick it out a second.
No, that truth telling
Yes.
and being truth.
But again, you can't force something down people's throats. Your style has to be Socratic. Why do you believe that? Where'd you get that information? Don't say, well, that's stupid, that's wrong, that's wrong. Why do you ever think of that?
Another phrase that I was told, I went to a training about how to talk to people about racism.
Yes. Yes.
And a similar line. Help me unpack that. Help me unpack why you're thinking that way. Help, explain it to me.
Let me say this. I taught psychology at undergrad. I always told my students in my counseling class, don't ever ask why.
No.
Why makes people defensive? So avoid the why question. But what's your source? How did you come to believe that? Not why did you believe it? How did you come to believe that? Questions like that. So we want to be Socrates, we want to draw them out. And hopefully they'll see the error in their ways, but if they don't, come on.
I was just gonna say, I have a sister who's got to find politics, but she needed to reach out to neighbors and friends who voted opposite Trump and to understand why. And so instead of asking why, she said, can you tell me, I understand you voted this way, but what values did you most, what values
Kind of guided you this
did you stand on?
Yeah.
That, you know, because.
Yeah.
Because she said why is just.
And values, you gotta be careful, because it'd be a loaded question too.
Yeah.
Now, you want me to defend my values, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it depends.
Well, we're very sensitive people, we gotta be careful, don't we? But I
What
like
do
that,
you
I
value?
like that line,
Like,
yeah,
what do you value better than values, because that's a.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important if we're going to be truth tellers, not to put people off, not to make them defensive, not to reinforce their false belief. Okay? Yep, we've been through the whole. Okay, I'm gonna skip that. Hold on. You can relate to that. Did any of you grow up in the South? Where did you grow up?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, South. You go north and south and up.
Southside of Fort Wayne.
Sometimes that can make a difference. I grew up in southern Ohio. That's not really south, but I can tell you that's.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
And Indiana too,
yeah, absolutely.
very south.
Any of you familiar with Bishop Spong's work? He made this comment in one of his books. Maybe something, I'm not sure now which one. In my home, we had colored help. He wrote in his book, in the house and in the yard. Black people are not allowed in your house, as you know this. But he goes on to say, it was a cruel system. And I was one of the unknown beneficiaries. Just as you and I were no longer the unknown beneficiaries, but we were at some point. You and I, maybe the informed about climate change. But up to that point where we became informed, we were the unknowing beneficiaries of fossil fuels. We're no longer innocent. We have lost our innocence, folks. Science did that to you. But it's an innocence we have to lose. Once again, I'm profitable with evil. Though at that point in my life, some point in all our life, we were blissfully ignorant of the effects of burning fossil fuels. Are we not? But we get a little pass, but no more. We've lost our innocence. We can't clean innocence anymore. Bear with me. Don't turn me off right now. Is this a fair comparison? Obviously, if you're Japanese, you're going to probably, and I don't want to offend anybody. But if you're Japanese or relatives that were killed with the two bombs in Hiroshima, you're not going to think this is a fair comparison. That's okay. Let me tell you why I think it's fair. And you don't have to agree. Because it's just a belief, it's not fact. This is what was said when Leo Szilard first confirmed somebody's hypothesis that you could split the atom. So the moment he realized that you could split the atom, hadn't been split yet, but theoretically it's possible. He said, look out of my mind. What was that? Then, when they set the first one off in the New Mexico desert, they saw that mushroom cloud. This again before the bomb had been dropped in Japan. Oppenheimer said, we waited until the blast had passed, we walked down the shoulder, and then it was tragic. Nobody said a word. Some cried, he said. They also said some laughed. And I think maybe it was a nervous laugh. Because they realized the potential for destruction that the atomic bomb had. This is before nuclear bombs. And Oppenheimer went on to quote Bhagavad Gita, "Na I have become death." Is it too much to suggest that climate change is another moment like this? What do you think? Too much to suggest. It isn't now. I mean, with the atomic bomb, it was a boom, that was it. Of course, days and years after, people suffer. But we're not to the point where we're exploding. We're not. Is it too much to suggest there's an equivalency here? Whether exactly equivalent or not, I don't know. There's an equivalency. you said earlier, we came close at times to a nuclear holocaust. Can we avoid the next holocaust?
We're gonna be a lot more imploding as opposed to exploding.
Yes.
And think about, the apartment building in Florida. I mean,
Yes.
that is, it's not, I'm not saying that it's the cause of it, but there are those, again, the base is not supportive.
Yeah. Went. Gotta have a firm foundation. Can't build your house on sand, can you? Know what happens when you try to build your house on sand. Now, again, I'm not saying they're equivalent, but according to the World Health Organization, climate change is causing 150,000 deaths. Well, it's almost already more than we lost with the time. Again, I hope I'm not offending anybody. I'm not saying the reason. I'm saying there's parallel. I'm gonna skip that. I'm gonna tell you a pair. Yes.
I, a few days ago, got my card and ER was on, so I didn't get the whole story. But it turned on right when they said they was interviewing Native people in Alaska, and they were saying that their town was gonna be gone by 2025. At first, I thought I misheard, and then later they went on to say, yes, in 4 more years, our town will be gone.
Yeah.
It'll be underwater.
They're small little buildings, probably.
And I didn't hear.
For their
about
ancestors
that.
that lived there probably for years.
Yeah.
Imagine the place, I grew up in Southern Ohio. It was almost run by coal, but not totally. I mean, the place I used to swim was an old reservoir created by the coal mine. But to get to it, you had to traipse through this old slag that they just dumped on the earth. And in the summertime, being poor with kids, we didn't wear shoes. So you had, on a hot day, you ran for the nearest little grassy patch. You stop and rest, let your feet cool off and take off again. So, yeah, yes.
It's not directly related, but I think that it can be indirectly, if not directly related. In the ocean, or what- And our friend that lives down there, she said, I said, oh my God, she said she doesn't go in the ocean anymore because there's so much bacteria. And she also said, I said, oh my gosh, it's, kind of our luck that we got this while we were down there. And she said, oh no.
And more smart investors aren't looking for Southern Florida to invest in. They're looking for inland. Because I know what's happening. The water's rising. And not only is it going to swamp things, but it's also going to mix with the fresh water they now have. So they're going to have a fresh water problem as they have out west. It's a salt water. Good Samaritan. And you're familiar with the story, right? So imagine though, what is injured and suffering and needs help is humanity. Do you walk on by? You stop and ask, what can I do? Maybe walked on by and they saw a Samaritan. You're not one of those walking by people here. Walking by person. A lot of people just walking on by. I don't see that. My mind's made up for choosing back.
I think we need to wrap. Okay, we gotta, I think we want to get it out.
Out here to have such interesting people and bright, intelligent people who ask good questions.
Mentioning that religion, religious leaders could be part of the solution. But I'm kind of curious about what your take is as far as religion being a major contributor to the problem, because so many religions pound into their subjects that there is only one truth, and you can't question what you already know.
I'm going to accept that as you make a statement. Unless I agree with that. Let me flip back real quick. Hang on a minute, Chuck.
And behind the atheists, but it's my understanding that there's been a movement within many churches to argue moral questions. And it's just taken some traction, some big traction.
Oh, yes.
Well, in George Bush Sr.'s term, actually 50 evangelical scientists went to him to ask him to change the climate change. That's very little for all that, and they called it creation care. And I know the local Vineyard Church here started a move among its people, the people who believed in that strongly, that church supports, like if you want to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every church, it's not every religion, but there's not enough.
Oh, no.
It's very, I'm a church goer, have been most of my life, and I'm embarrassed
Yes.
by what some religious folks believe in, do, say. Is embarrassing. It's shameful. And that's why I make this distinction.
Yes.
For me, spirituality is a way of perceiving and being in the world. It has nothing to do with beliefs, it has nothing to do with beliefs. It just has a way of perceiving and being in the world, characterized by these things I said. So I'm right on board with you, and I push my ministers as much as I can. I've given workshops on climate change in my church. Oh, we may get a handful of folks who are interested in the subject, but nonetheless, I don't let that discourage me. This is a nice size here. I'm really happy with the amount of people that showed up. Very pleased, because I know each of you are a disciple. You're a truth teller. And may God bless you in your mission. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Any of you know somebody with the program? We're going to change. I'll pass that around to you. We're running, I live in Nashville, but I'll travel in yours. To spread the word. So, my group. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, anybody, any bumpers?
What's it say?
Make Earth great again. Not everybody's in the bumper sticker. You see one car out there on the Wall Street on the left one.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We're in the new word. Thank you,
Does
sir.
anybody own the green CRV that is parked in the back of the building?
Green CRV.
It's parked in the back of the building at the staff entrance.
Good evening. Oh, look,
No.
Appreciate
Thank you, Paul. I'm gonna get some shots of your book because we are recording this, and we will have this available as a recording.
I like the idea of the older generation and your to the that was one of the first images I came on. I think that's
Thank you so much.
but they can go through stoppingglobalwarming.com, stoppingglobalwarming.com for a preview.
So my question was going to
Thank
be,
you, Rita and Chuck.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
It's going to be, how do we talk to, or do we even talk to those people that have already made their mind up? Do we waste our time, or do we do the
Well,
suggested?
that's Could we talk about something else?
Wisdom is that.